Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Star Stuff Podcast, where we talk all things Star Wars. My name is Colin.
And I'm Josh.
We're here to talk about Shocker, Star Wars. Wow, so exciting! How are you today, Josh?
I'm doing very well, actually. Fun shout out that I had the other day while I was working at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh,
Shout out to DJ Elliott. It was good to see you.
nice.
Very nice to see all the hosts from all of Celebration. Got to shake their hand and talk with them a little bit, and hopefully see you in Japan. It was lots of
Yeah.
fun.
Did did you see DJ Hozzy Dave?
No, I didn't see him
Oh
because I
man.
feel like he's still working. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
it was
nice.
cool to see those guys.
Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, for this week in Star Wars, let's talk about how the game Jedi. I don't know why I said Jedi. Force of Habit, Star Wars Outlaws. It's having its own panel over at San Diego Comic-Con over the convention center, and
Yay!
they are going to have a 1-hour panel on July 22nd, and it's going to have Bradley D. Baker. He's going to be talking about the game, and he's also voicing Jabba the Hutt in that game. As some know, the game takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. How do we feel about Bradley D. Baker,
I mean,
the voice of every clone and all animation
they
to
said, "Go
play?
ahead, give it to him.
Yeah.
Let him be the Hut. Let's
Yeah.
have fun with it." No, I mean it's cool. It's good to have him
Yeah.
in it. So, I mean, I'm happy. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much of communication we're gonna have with them,
Yeah.
but we'll have to see. And I'm really wondering what the story is going to be like if you're having, or how involved you actually are with the main plots of the other
Right.
films.
Well, something else as well is that for Jabba, like, I mean, in the Phantom Menace, if you watch the credits and you go all the way down to where it says like the people who played like the different characters, it says Jabba the Hutt played himself, which I thought, which I think is kind of funny. But yeah, so
I
seeing
mean, no one
him,
wants to put in like 15 different puppeteer actors.
well, in the Phantom Menace, he was all animated, so he was not a puppet actually going around. So he was all digital CGI. So that's always puzzled me. I know if I did the research, I could probably figure it out. But every time I'm watching the credits for that movie, I always laugh because I'm like, oh yeah, it's just Jabba playing himself. But for other news, The Acolyte. There was a picture that leaked from footage of Acolyte, but in reality, it's the trailer footage from Star Wars Celebration, and I guess people are just realizing it. But so Josh, myself, and David had the awesome opportunity to go to the Lucasfilm panel over in London.
Oh, dude, this series is gonna be so hype. Like, honestly, it's
So
funny
many
because
Jedi, bro.
when we actually get to see this film, or like the trailer drop in like for a trailer, and then just seeing how many people like actually just go nuts to see all these Jedi just ignite their lightsaber. It's gonna be fun.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I know there's a shot from the trailer where I think it was like at least over 6 Jedi. I'm thinking maybe there was 10 in that shot, and they all turned their
Yeah, it
lightsabers
was
at
fun.
once.
Yeah.
And they're like in this kind of grass plain setting. And I just remember our whole row was like, Jedi, let's go. And it's because the Jedi are in their prime. Now, I know George Lucas said during Attack of the Clones that is when like the Jedi were in the prime, but this is the moment right here.
I
This is when
think
Jedi are being Jedi.
it's Jedi, but it's protector Jedi. It is
Yes.
not militant Jedi, which is very, very cool.
They have nothing to do with the politics. They are not influenced by any of that, which I'm really
Cool.
pumped.
It's much more spiritual, and I feel like it's kind of that. That's why I enjoyed seeing a lot of those aspects in Jedi Survivor. with all the High Republic stuff is just it's
Yeah,
the point where we've dropped so much stuff. It's going to be awesome to see something that takes place in live action in the High Republic era.
absolutely. And the show is
But
coming out on it sounds like it's going to be the beginning of next year. We don't know when, but that's the time frame. And
okay.
then this fall you've got Skeleton Crew, and we're still waiting on Ahsoka. That's
Mhm.
coming out on August 23rd. Uh, but right now, Acolyte doesn't have an official release date except the year, which is next year, and it's also coming out with season 2 of Andor, and then Bad Batch season 3 and Tales of the Jedi season 2.
The interesting thing for me is that she explained that wasn't really actually shown in the trailer, and I don't think when we eventually do drop the trailer that this is going to. I don't know why it wasn't really portrayed in the trailer. Is that it's taking place from the perspective of the bad guys and not from the good guy side. So I'm wondering how they're going to portray that on screen because she definitely said that. I think it's been hinted at that with. I mean, even the name Acolyte. I'm just wondering where we're gonna start that story to where you're like, oh, I'm completely following the bad guys here. That'll be interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. So
Did you get
I'm
that impression from the trailer? Like you didn't like you saw bad guys, but I don't think I was sitting there going, this is their evil master plan, and they're gonna
yeah.
do this. I just felt like, oh, I don't know, because I haven't seen the trailer in a long time, and it was super hype, and everyone was igniting their lightsaber, and everyone was going crazy. But from what I saw on screen, I was kind of like, oh, it's a give and a take. It's the light side and the dark side. That's very cool. I just didn't think that I saw um, anything to really do with a big plot point of being that
Right.
we're mainly going to be focusing on a story about the bad guys.
We didn't get any. I from my memory, we didn't get any red lightsaber. Uh, yeah, no, there were no red lightsabers.
There weren't any red lightsabers. You are very correct. I
Yeah,
think that they had Force users, just they had no lightsabers yet.
right. So now I'm curious of why they didn't share that. We know the plot is that a Jedi Master is reuniting with their Padawan, and they're kind of doing like a investigation on some dark elements that are happening. And I think this is kind of like the birth of, you know, of of the dark side kind of leaking into the Republic. So my suspicion is we'll probably get
Plagueis.
Darth Plagueis.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
everyone thinks that.
yeah.
I'm very excited.
And that makes the most sense. It really makes the most sense as long as they don't change the species. I want them to, um, I be
You
like
don't want
I
them to Kenobi the species again?
no, just
Please no.
yeah, just I mean, they didn't even change Thrawn that much, and it's just like just just keep the same species as Darth Plagueis,
Mm,
because I think, and if you guys haven't read the novel, go and read it. The Darth Plagueis novel is great. You learn a lot about the character, even though it's not canon anymore. But there's a lot of elements that seem canon, and the whole thing with Darth Sidious kind of becoming the one. It's a very interesting concept of being the one and true Sith Lord. So it's
mhm.
definitely a great read. I know it's on Audible, but yeah, go and check out that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna get a lot more. Everything from the trailer that we saw, the sets were amazing. It was a lot of fun. Everyone was super hyped, seeing all these lightsabers everywhere. I think that was our pretty much our highlight of the trailers that we saw.
Yeah.
Um, and I can't wait to see all these Easter eggs and different points of things that are going to lead into the Phantom Menace. Um, I'm really wondering how much High Republic stuff we're gonna get in this that is a good tidbit to be like, yes, these people were around. Like, are we gonna get like a Darth Bane reference? Are we gonna get all
Okay.
like proper confirmations of something that has been happening in the background?
So we know a decent amount of the Sith Lords are canon because if you watch Rise of Skywalker
Yeah.
on Exegol, you like kind of see like that kind of statue that has like a bunch of the different Sith Lords on there, and you can only see it for a second. But we know that they're spending some time on Coruscant, which is pretty cool. From the trailer, and then we know the cast is pretty decent. We know it's taking place to like around that 200-year mark before the events of all the Phantom Menace. So I don't know if
Mhm.
there's going to be time jumps or not. I would suspect there may be, but there's also characters from the High Republic books that are going to be in this show, which is pretty cool.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Yep. And Christopher Nolan has recently stated that he's not he's done doing superhero movies. That's kind of out the door for him. He's not interested anymore. I think he crushed it with Batman. I think he set the tone for superhero films, in my opinion. But when someone asked him about Star Wars, he didn't rule it out. If Christopher Nolan did a Star Wars film, what era would you want it to be in? Or what character would you want him to do?
So all of the Christopher Nolan films involve something to do with time, and that's their big go around. It's always some element of time.
Okay.
You didn't know that?
Well, no, I'm just trying to picture that in the Dark Knight trilogy. Can you explain that to me?
So like, okay, so all of Christopher Nolan's films will deal with time, like Memento.
Yeah.
To like, you know how in Interstellar it's the passage of time.
Yep.
Tenet, it is the future and the past being brought together through time. And then like in Batman, it's much more subtle, where it's like passage of time.
Okay.
But yeah, every single one deals with time. That's his like big thing, and I wonder what we could do with Star Wars being a theme with time.
I would probably say the Old Republic, and then maybe have the film go through like the phases that will where like it's the fall of the Old Republic and it goes into the High Republic, and then that way, because Christopher Nolan does a lot of things, I mean, where his like theme is also darkness. So I'm thinking the Old Republic would be great because then he could touch on Bane, he could touch on Darth Raven. Having Darth Raven maybe as the main character would be really, really cool.
Would be very fun. Would be very, very fun.
Yeah.
Something that I think that needs to happen before that change is I think that like yeah, Lucasfilm in general would have to be much more open to giving people the opportunity to do whatever they want for
Have
Star
more
Wars.
freedom, absolutely.
We keep hearing projects being like put on pause and hold, and we don't know what's happening with it, and it's like it's hard for me to see a whole bunch of people that have a whole bunch of really cool ideas not be used, and especially for Star Wars, which anything new is always super refreshing and it's super needed. And I think that as I've said before, I don't want it to fall into the trap of being the same with like Marvel right now is in a trap of it's the same and people criticize it being the exact same thing over and over and over again. I like new things, which is
Yeah.
cool because I mean we do definitely have some new things coming, especially with I mean even Skeleton Crew being
Yeah.
like this whole on Goonies take of Star Wars, which I'm super excited for. We used to talk about it a lot and less of Acolyte, but after we saw that Acolyte trailer, we were just blown away.
Yeah.
So I really want to just see what other people's reactions are to those trailers because those and see what other people pick up on because the complete tone from those two different trailers that we saw are completely different, polar opposites,
yeah.
but they're still great. I want to see if they can really nail the landing with the Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that they spent so much money, also because it's not just Star Wars and you get a pass because it's Star Wars, you also have to land the nailing feeling that it is set like it's that 70s, 80s feel again.
Right. And I think they will. From the trailer that we got, it definitely had that. Would you really think that Kathleen Kennedy kind of nailed the description of the show, which is it's going to have that the Amblin Studio vibe, which that's the same studio that made E.T., Goonies, like those 80s films. And, nothing screams more 80s than than those films, because the show is kids going on an adventure. It's not going to be, like the Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures that's on 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 Disney Junior. It's going to be a show where I guess they also kind of threw in that Stranger Things vibe, I guess.
Yeah,
But having that involved with Star Wars is definitely going to be interesting. And from the footage that we saw,
it's great. It's great.
they
They nailed it. Yeah.
they crushed it. And I just remember a shot where there is Vane. He's the pirate, and he kind of leans down. And I just remember just being like, that shot just feels like a Steven Spielberg, shot. And
Mhm.
I was just so excited, even though he's not directing it, but you definitely get the vibe out of the
Yeah,
entire
of
show.
course. And I mean, a thing that I think we've talked about before is that I didn't feel it as much as you could definitely tell with what they were going for Skeleton Crew, but for Acolyte, it did feel like they had much more wire work. And what I mean by that is those like old like samurai films to Chinese films where they're flying in the air, and it's something that I really liked. It's a different take on visual Star Wars, and something that I really don't want to happen for Star Wars is that we just have the same old kind of like, hey, it's Star Wars, so it gets a pass. I think
Right.
having a fresh take on different things works. Actually, that comment that someone posted up, um, like if we yeah, that Star Wars trilogy, I would love to see like an Old Republic trilogy. However, I don't want it to just get a pass because it's Star Wars. I want it to feel different. And like what way we would go and who would direct it would be making all the difference. And I really want them to be able to have someone come in and give their own feel to Star Wars, because I feel like that's super important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. And there's another movie coming out this year by Gareth Edwards, and it's called The Creator, and you definitely get that Star Wars vibe from it. And I always thought if Christopher Nolan did a film, it would have that Rogue One vibe, but it would also have probably more darkness kind of tied to it.
Like a grounded in realism feel.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I wouldn't
And
doubt that it would be like a war biopic, but it's like Star Wars set.
yeah, I just think if Christopher Nolan did his own thing, it didn't have anything to do with the original trilogy, and it didn't have anything to do with the High Republic, I definitely think the Old Republic would be the best era to do,
Mhm.
because it is a very dark time. And it's when the Sith are pretty strong. They're pretty up there. And it would be a war biopic, yeah, but it would be a war biopic of the Jedi versus the Sith, which is something we've always wanted to see from the Knights of the Old Republic cinematics that have come out
Mhm.
over the years, like of that giant fight that they have in the Jedi Temple. Could you
Yeah,
imagine
it's
if that was
beautiful.
live action?
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I think I would love to see the struggle of them realizing that the greatest faults that they have is each other. And being having the birth of the two, like the rule of two.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I would love to see a movie based on the birth of the rule of two and why it's placed, because I feel like that's a big one that a lot of people are like, well, there's only two. They're easily outclassed and easily outmatched. It's like I would love to see them Yeah, I feel like that's a big kind of normal person plot hole feeling where people are like, yeah, but there's just so many Jedi. It's like they have to be so like sneaky and cunning, but then you have Sith who completely overpower other people, and it's like I want to see these like lightsaber fights, but I want to get to the point where you're like, oh, their actual biggest enemy is themselves. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, true. And from Derpy Entertainment, they said that that do we remember when Disney first bought Star Wars? That's what they promised the older public. I so
I thought the DB brothers were originally penned to do something.
they were, and then they decided to
And then Game of Thrones didn't end very well, so
something else as well, which we have definitely talked. I think we talked about it on Sunday's episode, was the fact that we are getting uh a lot of the same recurring issues where they hire these directors. These directors have these ideas, and then as soon as they start to film or get ready in pre-production, Disney swoops in and they're like, "Hey, so I love what you're doing, but let's add this, let's do this, let's change that, let's take that out," and then they're like, freedom is gone, and that's a big it and honestly is a big reoccurrence, and that's why a lot of people who were supposed to do Star Wars films or Star Wars shows are no longer doing them because their freedom was taken away, because I think they want to reach certain audiences, and as soon as they bring these people in, then they change their minds. They're like, okay, well, this is kind of this is kind of the hype right now. How about we do this theme and instead of this theme? And I think, and again, going back to Christopher Nolan, I really think if they just let him do his own thing, they won't have to change anything. I because the Old Republic is such a dark time in the Star Wars universe, and it's Sith running wild. It is Jedi, trying to figure out like how to bring this chaos to an end. And if they had Christopher Nolan take the reins on that, do his own take, don't have any main characters, no Luke Skywalker, no C3PO, Leia, anything like that. Let him make his own characters, create his own legacy. I think he would crush it. And I and something else this person said is that they hope that it would have the same vibe as Andor if he did it. And I think it would, but I think it would be darker. I think it would be a lot darker.
I think a lot of people have been asking for more mature takes on Star Wars.
And I think Rogue One was the first step in the right direction, and then you got Andor, and you're just like, am I watching HBO Max? Like, what's what's going on
it's
here?
Much more. It has much more emotional weight, and it doesn't feel as in. I wouldn't say kid friendly, but it feels much more mature. I feel like kids wouldn't get as much entertainment out of that style of Star Wars than we did. Where you can have long dialogue scenes and still get just as much enjoyment and character development, all these different pieces that come together to form a really good Star Wars pick.
Yeah.
However, does that mean you and me absolutely love it, but the general audience isn't there to put up the numbers to where they can justify it? Because in my opinion, I feel like the wider, broader audience loves very flashy picks. Very like high action, keeps your attention going the entire way through. I can sort of tune out, but enjoy it for what it is. Is just it's dumb fun. But whereas Andor, I feel like you got to sit there and focus and pay attention through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Does that bode well for the future of Star Wars? I would love to see it. I just don't know how well it would do financially for them to keep on doing more things like that.
I always end the podcast like of the episode by saying, the future of Star Wars is bright, but right now just everything with the Bob Iger said is just there's a lot of things up in the air. of will will Star Wars continue the way that it is, or is it going to go down the path that Bob Iger really wants it to go? Because I really think that Marvel has kind of ruined the chances for other things, and now Star Wars might suffer for it. Because, in Josh, in your opinion, do you think that the way that Star Wars is now, do you think it's going the same pace as the same pace as Marvel is? But
Not yet.
okay,
And I feel like if it was the same kind, like Star Wars is lucky enough to where it's just different enough where we can have different things come in and
yeah,
have connected pieces and have like a different take on Star Wars where it's okay. However, there's definitely like a Mandoverse feel. Whereas like
yeah,
all of the Mandalorian seasons, Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka has the same kind of feel to it. Whereas if they continued on with that and didn't stop for a while, I feel like people would get fatigued of it, and that would go down that same road.
okay.
However, what
Yeah,
I've seen with Acolyte and what I've seen with Skeleton Crew makes me or it makes me hopeful for the future of Star Wars is that there's still somewhat different projects that come in and can change things up.
I I 100% agree because you also have to think about we've got the show, you know, yes, there's Mando, Ahsoka, and Skeleton Crew and Book of Boba. All the shows are connected, but then you have the other ones where it's kind of its own thing. You have the Tales of the Jedi. You have Acolyte, which is taken 200 years before the events of you know you know of the Mandoverse, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have the Bad Batch, which I think the second season definitely got more amped up than the first one, and I'm rewatching the Bad Batch right now because I'm just doing the full Star Wars rewatch. I'm not just
Mm-hmm.
doing Rebels. I'm going full out, but I've noticed that the from the from the first season compared to the second season definitely ramped up, and you have all these different projects that are tied together, but they're not. They're happening in the same universe, and I think that's great. And the thing with Marvel is every single event that happens, like, has to be mentioned in some capacity in the next show or movie. And with the Star Wars shows and the Star Wars movies that are happening, that's not, to me, that's not really the full case. Uh, because you have Star Wars, which is this gigantic timeline spread out through hundreds of years, maybe even thousands, especially when the James Mangold movie comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this opportunity just to spread out the timeline, not do one era, which is what they focused on when Disney first got the rights to Star Wars, where they were just focusing on the Galactic Civil War
Yeah.
and they weren't even touching the Clone Wars or any of that. So I'm very excited to see where it goes. But I think Marvel has definitely not. I mean, I don't like saying the word that it's ruined.
It's not ruined. It's just put a
Yeah.
financial damper on
Yes.
the future of Star Wars, where I feel like they're less likely to take risks, and they would much rather have projects that they feel they're confident in, and that ends up, putting more of a tighter grip on the control of what next projects could come out in their future of Star Wars.
Yeah.
These new movies that are coming out definitely have a different, like two of them are connected, but that one that is meant to be like First Jedi, that has me interested in to see where it goes and if it goes all the way to the end of what they want to do, no, all the way to the end of production.
I would how cool would it be if that movie, like, because basically it's them discovering the force and all that stuff. How cool would it be if it led to the first two Sith Lords, right? Uh and or like the first like Sith Lord, and then that would lead into the Old Republic, you know, and there would be time jumps and stuff, and then we saw, like, it would jump to then maybe to Darth Malak or something, And then
People
that's
have
when
such
Christopher Nolan came.
high expectations, though. High expectations for the Old Republic based on all that's already been put in stone. What happens if they change it? It's like, let's say they change it. It's good, but the fandom doesn't like how much they've changed it.
There is a lot at stake. I think that's something that a lot of people aren't talking about, which is the movie's definitely going to have a lot of anticipation because you are dealing with the Force, not something that is just a prop or is just a saying. Like, this is something that is so big to cinema. And when George Lucas came up with the Force and everything, it wasn't just a word. Like, he had a whole backstory of why the Force is so important for the dark side and light side and all that stuff. So now James Mangold has to turn that concept into a movie of why the Force, like how it came to be. It's definitely going to have that biblical vibe to it. And it's a big opportunity to bring something like that to life, but it's also a very scary thing to have that power of creating a story like this, because if you're right, if he screws up, there's no going back. And this is going to, in a way, this is going to have to tie in the entire Star Wars universe, right? Because this is the beginning. And this has to tie in, of why the Emperor is so hungry for power, and why the dark side is so strong, and why the light side is as well. You have to put all those force powers and those reasons and everything into one movie, and that's a big deal. So that's a big task for James Mangold, and I really hope that it does have that very dark vibe to it, because I don't think it's going to be black and white as people think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of gray areas.
That the comment on how Ahsoka's being portrayed to like general audiences now.
Because Ahsoka's okay.
I mean, right now, Ahsoka's really just like, in my opinion, it's that bridge between everyone. I mean, you got people who love the animated shows, have grown up with it, and then absolutely love Ahsoka. And then you have people nowadays who don't know much about her, but have seen her enough in live action to also like her. So having her own show, I'm wondering how many people are going to realize all these different characters coming in from Rebels. And it's interesting. I don't know how big of players these characters are going to play from Rebels, because I know that like Filoni was like, yeah, it's like a new season of Rebels. I'm like, okay, I don't know how many people have actually watched Rebels in comparison. Can you give a full valued arc of Ahsoka for normal people that they don't have to go back and watch all of Rebels? That's what I'm wondering.
This is a big step, not just for the character, but for Dave Filoni himself, because you have to think that he has been doing animation for a long time, but he's in the director's chair for this one, for the entire show of Ahsoka. That this has all been Dave Filoni. He wrote, he directed, like, of pretty much the entire show. Like, this is his baby, and it makes sense. But when you're doing it in live action, it's a lot different than in animation. I think you have limitations on what you can do. So I'm really curious if Dave Filoni doing a full show live action is going to be as great as we all think it is. I personally think it will be, but it is a big step up from Clone Wars and Rebels. And I know that he definitely had his practice with Mando, and Book of Boba and all that, but this is a big step of doing a whole show
Mhm.
uh, that is revolved around a character that came from animation. I also think that it does have a challenge because you also have him saying this is pretty much season 5 of Rebels. And you're right, not everyone has seen Rebels, not everyone has the interest of being in Rebels, but loves the character Ahsoka. Could you just watch the episodes with Ahsoka? Sure. Will it all make sense? Maybe not, because there are characters from Star Wars Rebels that sound like they are going to play a big part in this. Even though the show is called Ahsoka, there's a lot of Rebels elements in this show. So my, I guess what I'm trying to say is for those who don't want to watch Rebels, you might want to reconsider because you might go in and you might get confused. And I know, some people were like, well, I shouldn't have to watch a show to prep myself for another one. And it's like, well,
No,
you are,
I completely agree with that statement.
yeah, yeah. And it's like you are watching a Star Wars show. Star Wars. There's a lot of different characters spread out through different Star Wars movies, Star Wars shows. If you watch if you end up watching The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett, and then you're sitting there and you haven't watched the original trilogy, and you're like, "Who's this new Skywalker guy?" It's just like, I get it, I understand, but you have the source material right there. You can find out.
Well, here's the thing: is you could watch Mando, right?
Yeah,
Go all the way through it and still appreciate it for the character of Mando because it's a show, new
yes,
character and everything, right? What I don't want is Ahsoka to become a fest of, well, you should have watched this other thing to get this entire giant plot point. I want it to at least be able to be moderately explained in the fact that anyone can hop on and enjoy it.
okay, so
The,
you wanted to feel like Captain America, the
the
Winter
only
Soldier,
the
where
only
it feels like
problem
its own thing.
I
Sorry.
just don't want them to do is run into a thing that Marvel will probably do soon is that people who are born today will have like in the future of Marvel may grow up liking characters, but they have to go back way long
Yeah.
ago to understand them. And like we as like Star Wars fans, it's like, hey, you can watch the original trilogy, and that's great, but it's kind of like you can also Star Wars is for everyone. You can hop on wherever, and I love that about Star Wars. And I want it to keep the same. I don't want it to have a Marvel feeling where it's like, well, you should have watched this episode that
Yeah.
connects to this TV show to understand this giant plot point. It's like I don't like that.
Yeah. I think they're doing this for Ahsoka because number one, Dave Filoni really, really wanted to. Number two, I think Ahsoka's story is very interesting, but as much as a main character as she's gonna be, I really think that the world between worlds is gonna play a big part. And I just don't think it's just gonna be used as a prop piece in a way. I really think the world between worlds is going to play a large role. I think it's going to feel like its own character because when Dave Filoni or George Lucas ever introduced something, they didn't put something in there just to be put in there. There was a backstory to it, or there was a reason why. And there's a reason why that they put in the world between worlds and Star Wars Rebels. My theory, which I talked about this on the last episode, and this kind of amazed James, which is, and I think I might have talked to you about this, is that they are going to treat this as a Indiana Jones type artifact. You have the you have the protagonist and you have the antagonist going after the same thing. They want to change the world and in a way. You have the antagonists that are going after the world between worlds because they want to save Thrawn. The protagonists want to go after the world between worlds because they want to save Ezra. And my guess is because Ezra and Thrawn go into hyperspace in Rebels with the windows open, the normal person wouldn't be able to survive that. How on earth would they survive that? Would Ezra use a force bubble and put it around them? That doesn't make sense. having the world between worlds, having, Ahsoka or the bad guys pull them out of the stream right before they go into hyperspace makes the most sense to me. That is the most logical way to do it. Because if not, then I would love to hear, and they might come up with a very creative way on how they survived going into hyperspace and space
So you
with the
don't think
windows.
Ezra is the Inquisitor?
I
I
feel like
think Ezra's that Inquisitor.
I feel like I saw his feet though, and his feet were like alien feet.
Oh well, I thought that I think that Inquisitor is Ezra.
I keep hearing that theory. I don't know. I think that would be because of as soon as I heard it, I was like, that's way too on the nose. They wouldn't do that. I mean, if they do, they do, and
No,
it's like,
he's got normal feet.
oh, okay. But the mask is the one. See that. Okay, well, can you? Okay, how about you make that theory make sense to me then? Why on earth would Ezra become an Inquisitor? Why on earth would he fight Ahsoka?
Sees the reasoning inside Thrawn, like Thrawn's side. It's
Okay.
not based on whether I do feel like they spent a lot of time together, right? And Thrawn ends up talking to him to the point where they're like, da 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 da. Okay, maybe you are right.
The only
And yeah, that's where I would stand. I wouldn't
so
doubt that they'd do something like that because
the,
we don't know. Like, I understand what you're saying. Like, they get pulled through, but they're definitely not together from the trailers.
right. So my guess is that someone gets or because of the only thing that I can think of that would make Ezra turn to the dark side is if they pull them from like a different timeline or something. Because Ezra learned a lot from Kanan, and if you're a fan of Rebels, you understand how far he's come from the beginning of his journey. And at the end, he's seen the light. He understands why everything needed to happen, and he's come to peace with everything. I don't think they would pull a Last Jedi and change the entire character like they did with Luke Skywalker. I
Could
don't
you have
think
two
they would do
different
that
versions
again.
pulled through?
I could see maybe there being a dark side version of Ezra that's not the light side as a version of Ezra. Because in the world between worlds, you have to think about it like there's like time, you know, it's
Imagine there's like two different versions, right? There's one that they pull through, right?
yeah.
And then one that they left with Thrawn.
Yeah. See, boom. See, that would make sense to me. I don't think they would change the character because then because to me they would be doing a Last Jedi, and I think they want to kind of stay clear of that again. I don't think they want to change characters that are already established, and I really don't think that Dave Filoni would do that. To where he would, because I feel if Ezra turned to the dark side and then he just became a pawn of Thrawn's, I feel like his whole journey in Rebels would have been for nothing, and I think
It's
that
funny
would have
because
been a waste of time.
I don't. These are just dark side users. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are Sith. Is a big one to me. It's like
Okay.
they just have fallen to that feeling of like pure hatred, or like it's a way to survive. It's not necessarily that they are bad people. It's just that that's what they use. I think that's a big like plot point inside of Survivor as well, is that it's not just the fact it's not like he's like, boom, I'm Sith now, I'm gonna follow Sith like teachings. It's like, hey, I slipped into full on rage. So
Yeah.
it's something interesting to me. I'm kind of like I could see Ezra becoming hateful in the fact that when he left, like no one came for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I just I don't know.
You're like, please don't let that be the actual fact.
Well, I'm just like, if they ended up doing it, I would just be very surprised by it, and
Yeah,
I think
imagine
that
two versions of Ezra going around.
that I would be okay with. I would be 100% okay with that because maybe they would be able to touch upon that in the movie that Dave Filoni is doing, and you know, you have Thrawn's army, you have the dark side Ezra, and then you have Ezra with Ahsoka, possibly Luke and Cal and all
So
those
like
other.
the Purgles like launch off the ship. They get it gets sent, and then like Ahsoka whatever pulls Ezra back through. But
Okay.
then there's also still an Ezra that stays because Ahsoka's like that. Because that's why Darth Vader thinks that she's dead.
Right.
But they initially thought that Ezra would die being like transferred by the Purgles right into
Yeah.
space, but he doesn't. Stays with Thrawn long enough for Thrawn to change his mind, and then we have this new future where it's like, you never came back for me. I know what the world between worlds is because I like helped whatever, and I like you never took me, so now I'm angry and I fall into rage.
Okay. That I would be fine with if they ended up having two versions of Ezra, because I just don't think Dave Filoni would just do a 360 on the character. The whole premise of the show and is for Ahsoka and Sabine to go find him, so then she can fulfill her destiny from the end of the show, which was them going off on the next adventure to fulfill the promise
Mhm.
that she was trying to keep to Ezra. So I
Yeah.
feel like if they just made him a dark side character and saying that he gave up hope, that would go against the premise of what he said of being like, "Hey, I have faith in you." I don't think he would just lose faith. I because of there was no real time frame of when she was supposed to go find him. I really don't think Ezra would give up. So if they did two versions of that, of where they pull him out of the correct time, and then there's like and then the and then the protagonists pull Thrawn out and Ezra years later,
Mhm.
and then Ezra's like, "Wow, they really didn't come after me. You know what? I am joining Thrawn." That would make sense to me, but I don't think they would go just do a full 360 on the character just to make him dark side and pull a Ryan Johnson. Sorry to all the Ryan Johnson fans, but I don't want them to do what they did to Luke Skywalker. Um, to to
I just feel like Ezra
have a
has more
plot
of a claim
twist.
to be more of a dark side user than Luke did.
Yeah,
That makes more sense in my opinion because like, he has already fallen once. So
yeah,
he's
but
been enticed and he has used dark side abilities. So
yeah. Who who knows what's gonna happen? But that's my theory. I would love for it to happen. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But to me, that's probably the most logical thing for them to use the world between worlds to save them. Uh, could they go back to? Could they find out where the destination of the ship is? Absolutely, because we see Purgles in the trailer. They could maybe find the shipwreck. They go there, and maybe they find a couple of skeletons, and they're like, "Oh no, they're dead already." But then they're like, "Wait, there, there's the world between worlds. Let's use that instead." But then the bad guys have the same idea, and that's why we see Ahsoka in the same forest in the same area as the bad guys in the world between worlds area. Um, again, these are all just theories, but who knows? Uh, one of our listeners says, unless you count the books after Return of the Jedi, which aren't canon to Disney, this is all new in the time period. We really don't know what can happen at this point going forward besides the Filoni film. You're so what you're saying is true from a certain point of view because we know that everything leads up to the sequel trilogy. Um, uh, but we don't know how we get to the sequel trilogy just like specifically, we don't know where everything with the Mandoverse is happening. And with the World Between Worlds, it is a very interesting concept. I know Josh talked about I think it was maybe a couple of months ago of where we wanted to see Ahsoka kind of have her peace with the Jedi, and maybe she becomes a Jedi again. So she goes through the World Between Worlds and she sees different elements and stuff that makes her have faith in the Jedi again, and then she becomes a Jedi again herself. I could see them doing that. I don't think they would just put the World Between Worlds in there and just add it in there. It's going to play a large part of the show, and I'm excited to add more lore to the Star Wars universe about the Force. And I think this is probably the best thing that we're going to get about the Force until we get the Dawn of the Jedi stuff with James Mangold.
Yeah, I do appreciate a lot of the spiritual elements back of us talking about the Force again. Which I mean, yeah. Did we see like the owl in the trailer?
I don't think we did.
Okay, cool.
Just wanted to check. Morai is her name.
But yes, I do like having much more spiritual elements back in Star Wars. It's cool.
Absolutely. And then for the last topic, it would be Lando. We haven't heard anything about Lando pretty much since 2020 during the investor call back then. Did you watch that when that came out?
By the way? I'm just kind of wondering, like,
that was how so that hype, works. Man. That was so hype.
I'm wondering if they just kind of like, they're like, you're going to be working on it, and they do like certain amount, and like, hey, we're going to put a pause on it. He's like, okay, and then just never gets called back. Like, okay.
I remember that day too, and I just remember being mind blown, and I did a live stream directly after, and just being like, they announced like 11 projects. I was not expecting this. This is such a great day.
Then Solo had to do poorly, so then they're like, just kidding.
Again, Solo, in my opinion, Solo didn't do great because of the backlash of The Last Jedi. And I know some people. I actually really enjoyed Solo. I thought Solo was a great film. Now, was it necessary? I think that's a question that a lot of people don't like to talk about. But was it necessary? In my opinion, I don't think it was. I think it was fun, but I don't think it really affects the storyline in a way where, if you think about it, it's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, of where if you take Indiana Jones out of the movie, it doesn't really. And some people are like, oh, like you have watched the Big Bang Theory, but honestly, think about it. If you take Indiana Jones out of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's still going to have the same income at the end of the film.
Yeah.
If you take Solo out of the storyline of Star Wars, it doesn't change anything.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I could see people like, maybe arguing is, okay, well, if like a Han Solo's movie didn't, happen, then we would have never seen him on Tatooine, and then him and Luke and Obi-Wan would never go to the Death Star. But again, I really don't think it was that necessary. I did enjoy it. There were a lot of elements I loved it. I loved them playing Sabacc. I loved the relationship that we saw between him and Lando. I thought Donald Glover did a great job as Lando. I would love to see a Lando show. I'm not going to lie. I think that show would do great. If Billy D. Williams is connected to it, though, that's my main premise. Is if he did some narration in the beginning and he talked about like the Lando Calrissian Chronicles, just like in the books, fine with it, totally fine. But not having him in the show in some way would be sad. But Donald Glover crushed it as Lando. I would love to see it happen. The main writer did come out recently because he's the one that helped write and direct the new Haunted Mansion. And he said that he put his heart and soul into the script and everything for it. And then all of a sudden, he got one update in 2020, which most likely was the investor's call. He didn't exactly say what the update was, but then he hasn't heard since. And that was 3 years ago. So I'm just curious of what's going on with that. Because they haven't said it's not happening like they did with Rangers of the New Republic.
I feel like it's one of those things that they want to do something with, but they just kind of haven't decided as of just yet. I'm assuming, like, a lot of people like Star Wars banks on the fact of Ahsoka, and I understand that. I think that it really banks on the fact of how well Skeleton Crew does, with how much money they blasted into that project.
Yeah, because that show is the second. Yeah. Oh man, that's so crazy to think about. That show is the second highest expensive budget for a TV show in history.
Which is why I don't understand why they haven't been like pushing advertising it, or just kind of adding things that are seeds and plants. Really, I mean, we had the same dude from the Pirate Guy.
Oh yeah, because of
and Mando.
Yeah, because of Zvane.
Yeah, but
so here's okay. I think my big thing about Skeleton Crew as well is I want them, we kind of saw from the trailer for Celebration, but I want to see a lot of practical effects, because that's what the Goonies and E.T. and those movies had, was a lot of practical effects. Now the way of doing those now can be expensive, because of it's kind of outdated. Mm-hmm. No one really does those effects anymore in that way. So if they ended up doing that, but with Star Wars, like with Star Wars now, I'm telling you, it's gonna be awesome, and the budget's gonna make sense. But
it just makes it, like, in my head, it just means that one has to financially perform well for them to continue on with like interesting Star Wars projects.
That has to have a large viewership. And I know we're definitely going to be advertising the crap out of it, like even more now when it comes out. And the fact that there is a small orphan child, which is the same species as Max Rebo, I am beyond happy. And I remember when we saw it, I looked over at you and you rolled your eyes and you're like, great, just great. Because of I love Max Rebo, and I love the fact that they're putting more species in Star Wars now that is not just Max Rebo, because I know like he was like the famous of his species, but now like we're getting a different stuff, and we actually see the same species in the High Republic as well. So yeah, but yeah, that is really everything. Is there anything else Star Wars that you think I missed? Is there like any major Star Wars things that you're looking forward to?
When we're ramping up to new kind of like hype for Star Wars, I feel like more advertisement for Star Wars would be helpful.
Oh yeah,
I'm excited for that. Hopefully we get something maybe December time.
December, yeah, December would make a lot of sense for a lot.
Because I mean, in comparison, like Jedi Survivor was advertised like insanely crazy. I would love for them to start doing that for shows as well.
I don't think they really advertised Survivor until maybe a couple of months out, though. Because do you remember at Celebration, everywhere we walked, like everywhere, not even just in the convention center. I think we would just be walking on the streets of London, and we would end up seeing a sign that would just have the logo on it, or Cal and BD1. And we were like, oh wow, this is great. But 2024 actually is a decent year for Star Wars, even though there's no Celebration, because you've got the game Star Wars Outlaws, Acolyte, Bad Batch Season 3, Andor Season 2, and Tales of the Jedi. And most likely there might be some other smaller projects in there as well somewhere.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have to see, but I am definitely excited for next year. I'm definitely excited for Ahsoka coming out, and Skeleton Crew. And I think, again, I know we talked a lot about Skeleton Crew this episode, but you have to think like how different that show is going to be.
Here's hoping, man.
Yeah. Yeah. But as always, we would like to thank all of our wonderful Patreon supporters from the purple tier all the way to our blue tier. We would not be doing this if it wasn't for you guys. We love you all. Thank you so much for all your support for over the years. And please go check out our Clone Wars commentary on there. Because that highlights a bunch of stuff that you're definitely going to see in Ahsoka, most likely. So go and catch up on the Clone Wars. And we're also on Instagram at Star Wars Stuff Podcast. We're also on Threads at Star Wars Stuff Podcast. We're on Twitter at Stuff Pod. Again, we're on Patreon at Stuff Pod. Oh, sorry. Nope. At Star Wars Stuff Podcast 2187. That's embarrassing. Oops. And then that's going to be on patreon.com. Again, we have a lot of exclusive content on there. Go and check it out. We're on TikTok. Search Star Wars Stuff Podcast, where you have an email, starwarsstuffpodcast@gmail.com. That's a professional email. Go and check it out because we would love to hear feedback from you guys. We love your feedback. So please go and email us. And yeah. And we're also on Facebook, Star Wars Stuff Group, and Star Wars Stuff Podcast page. Please go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please give us a review, even though it's all about David. Totally fine. Go ahead. We also have a website, brand new, StarWarsStuffPodcast.com. We have a bunch of new hosts on there. We have our bios. We have articles on there. We have news articles now, guys, which is awesome. And there's a lot more coming within the next couple of days, I believe, because there's a lot to talk about. So stay tuned for that. Go to StarWarsStuffPodcast.com. We're also on Twitch, Star Wars Stuff Gaming, where we play Star Wars Battlefront 2. Maybe we get attacked by Ewoks. Maybe we're the ones hunting the Ewoks. Who knows? Go and check that out. From myself and Josh and the rest of the family of the Star Wars Stuff Podcast, may the Force be with you.
Always.